A desperate plea. In the far reaches of the galaxy, the mighty Zorgax Empire had set its sights on a new target, the peaceful Elysian Confederation. For centuries, the Elysians had thrived, their crystal spires reaching towards the stars, their art and culture the envy of many. But the Zorgax cared little for beauty or wisdom. They sought only conquest, their massive warships casting shadows across 100 worlds. As the first shots were fired and the Elysian outposts fell, the Confederation leadership gathered in a grand chamber, their faces etched with worry. They were a peaceful people, their defenses meant to deter pirates and raiders, not a full-scale invasion. They knew they could not stand alone against the might of the Zorgax. "We must seek aid," said Premier Zalara, her voice heavy with the weight of her people's fate. "But from whom? Our allies are few and far between." There was a moment of silence, the assembled leaders deep in thought. Then, a quiet voice spoke up from the back of the chamber. It was Joran, a young diplomat known for his fascination with the distant world of Earth. "What about the humans?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "They are a young species, but they have proven themselves resourceful and brave." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Many of the Elysians knew little of Earth, save for the strange stories that occasionally reached their ears. Tales of a species that had fought its way from the brink of self-annihilation, that had reached for the stars even as they grappled with their own demons. Premier Zalara considered Joran's words. "The humans are untested in the galactic arena," she said. "Can we trust them with our fate?" "We have little choice," Joran replied. "The Zorgax will not stop until they have consumed us all." After a long debate, the Elysian leadership reached a decision. They would send a distress signal to Earth, a plea for aid in their darkest hour. Joran himself would craft the message, pouring his heart into every word. Far away, on the blue-green world of Earth, the message was received. In the halls of power, a fierce debate erupted. Some argued that Earth had no place in an interstellar war, that they should focus on their own troubles. But others, led by the charismatic Captain Jenna Reeves, saw an opportunity. "The Elysians are offering us a chance to prove ourselves," she said, her eyes blazing with determination. "To show that humanity is ready to take its place among the stars." Reeves had risen through the ranks of Earth's fledgling space command, earning a reputation as a brilliant tactician and a fearless leader. She had long dreamed of leading humanity's first mission beyond the solar system. After days of heated discussion, Earth's leaders reached a decision. They would send a small expeditionary force to aid the Elysians, with Captain Reeves at the helm. It was a risky gambit, but one they believed could change the course of history. As Reeves stood on the bridge of her flagship, the ESS Frontier, she felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. She knew the stakes were high, that the fate of not just the Elysians, but potentially all of humanity, rested on her shoulders. "Set a course for Elysian space," she ordered, her voice steady. "It's time to show the galaxy what humanity is made of." The Frontier, accompanied by a small fleet of advanced human spacecraft, leaped into the void, racing towards a distant conflict that would test the mettle of all involved. The die had been cast, and the future of two species now hung in the balance. Word count, 932. This part sets the stage for the conflict between the Zorgax and Elysians, and introduces the main human character, Captain Jenna Reeves. It highlights the Elysians' desperation and humanity's determination to prove itself on the galactic stage. As the human fleet emerged from the swirling vortex of hyperspace, Captain Jenna Reeves couldn't help but gasp at the sight before her. The Elysian homeworld was a marvel of beauty, its surface a tapestry of lush green forests and shimmering sapphire oceans, the massive crystal spires of its cities reaching towards the heavens. But the beauty was marred by the ugly scars of war. Massive Zorgax warships hung in orbit, their hulking forms bristling with weaponry. Smaller craft darted back and forth, engaging the beleaguered Elysian defenses in vicious dogfights. "Hail the Elysian leadership," Reeves ordered, her eyes never leaving the viewport. "Let them know that help has arrived." A few moments later, the face of Premier Zalara appeared on the main screen. She looked haggard, her once pristine robes tattered and scorched. "Captain Reeves," she said, her voice heavy with emotion. "We are grateful for your presence, but I fear you may have come too late." Reeves leaned forward, her gaze intense. "It's never too late, Premier. We're here to help, in any way we can." As the human fleet took up defensive positions around the Elysian homeworld, Reeves and her crew began the difficult task of coordinating with their new allies. Cultural misunderstandings and distrust plagued the early interactions, with the Elysians wary of these strange, unpredictable creatures from a distant star. To bridge the gap, Premier Zalara assigned one of her most trusted advisors, a young diplomat named Xyloth, to serve as a liaison to the humans. Xyloth was fascinated by these newcomers, eager to learn more about their culture and technology. But there was little time for cultural exchange. The Zorgax, seeing the arrival of the human fleet as a new threat, launched a massive assault on the Elysian capital. Dozens of warships descended from orbit, their weapons tearing through the city's defenses. On the bridge of the frontier, Reeves gritted her teeth as the ship shuddered under the impact of enemy fire. "All hands, battle stations," she barked. "We need to give the Elysians some breathing room." The human fleet sprang into action, their advanced weaponry and tactics taking the Zorgax by surprise. Lasers and missiles crisscrossed the void, the hulls of Zorgax ships buckling and shattering under the onslaught. In the midst of the chaos, Xyloth worked tirelessly to coordinate the Elysian defenses, relaying critical information to Reeves and her crew. Together, humans and Elysians began to turn the tide, pushing the Zorgax back from the capital. But the victory was short-lived. As the last Zorgax ship retreated, a new wave of reinforcements dropped out of hyperspace. These were no ordinary warships, but massive dreadnoughts, each one capable of laying waste to an entire fleet. On the frontier's bridge, Reeves felt a cold knot of fear in her stomach. She knew that even with the advanced technology of the human fleet, they were outmatched. The Elysians, their defenses already battered and broken, stood no chance. But as she looked around at her crew, at the determined faces of the Elysian soldiers on the screen, Reeves knew they couldn't give up. They had to find a way, no matter the cost. "Xyloth," she said, turning to the Elysian liaison. "I need everything you have on those dreadnoughts. Every scrap of data, every whisper of intelligence. If we're going to beat them, we need to understand them." Xyloth nodded, his eyes gleaming with a new resolve. "I'll get you what you need, Captain. Together, we'll find a way." As the Zorgax dreadnoughts bore down on the Allied fleet, Reeves and her crew prepared for the fight of their lives. They knew the odds were against them, but they also knew that the fate of two species hung in the balance. They would not fail. They could not fail. For the sake of the Elysians, for the sake of all humanity, they would find a way to victory, no matter the cost. Word count, 1102. This part introduces the Elysian homeworld and the scale of the Zorgax threat, as well as the cultural tensions between humans and Elysians. It ends on a cliffhanger, with the arrival of the Zorgax dreadnoughts and the Allied fleet facing seemingly impossible odds. Here is part 3 of the story, titled Turning the Tide. Turning the Tide. In the bowels of the ESS Frontier, Captain Jenna Reeves pored over the data Xyloth had provided, her brow furrowed in concentration. The Zorgax dreadnoughts were a formidable foe, their armor nearly impenetrable, their weapons capable of shredding even the strongest shields. But every enemy had a weakness. Every fortress had a crack in its walls. And Reeves was determined to find it. "There," she said, pointing to a schematic of the dreadnought's power core. "That's our target. If we can take out the core, the whole ship will go down." Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Kai Adachi, shook his head. "It's too well protected. We'd never get close enough." But Reeves wasn't listening. She was already moving, striding towards the engineering bay with a determined look in her eye. "Xyloth, with me. I have an idea." In the engineering bay, Reeves and Xyloth worked feverishly, modifying human weaponry with Elysian crystal technology. The result was a new kind of torpedo, one that could phase through solid matter and detonate inside a ship's hull. "It's risky," Xyloth warned. "We've never tested this technology on such a large scale." Reeves nodded. "But it's our only chance. We have to take it." As the human and Elysian fleets prepared for their final stand, Reeves presented her plan to the Allied leaders. Many were skeptical, the idea of untested weapons against such a formidable foe seeming like a fool's gambit. But Reeves was resolute. "We've come too far to turn back now," she said. "This is our moment. Our chance to show the galaxy what we're made of." In the end, the leaders agreed. The fate of their worlds would rest on the shoulders of a single, daring strike. As the Zorgax dreadnoughts bore down on the Allied fleet, Reeves and her crew put their plan into action. The Frontier and a squadron of Elysian fighters raced towards the lead dreadnought, dodging a hail of enemy fire. At the last moment, Reeves gave the order. "Fire the phase torpedoes." A volley of shimmering projectiles erupted from the Frontier's launch bays, passing through the dreadnought's shields as if they weren't there. Moments later, the dreadnought's hull rippled and buckled as the torpedoes detonated inside its power core. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, with a blinding flash of light, the dreadnought exploded, its shattered hull spinning off into the void. A cheer went up from the Allied fleet as the remaining Zorgax ships, thrown into disarray by the loss of their flagship, began to retreat. Against all odds, the humans and Elysians had struck a decisive blow. But the celebration was short-lived. As Reeves watched the Zorgax ships fleeing, a sudden blast rocked the Frontier. Alarms blared as the ship's systems went haywire, consoles exploding in showers of sparks. "Report!" Reeves shouted, gripping the arms of her command chair. "We're hit." Kai replied, his face grim. "A Zorgax fighter got a lucky shot. Main power is offline, shields are down." Reeves felt a cold knot of fear in her stomach. The Frontier was dead in the water, vulnerable to any passing enemy ship. And with the fleet engaged in pursuit of the retreating Zorgax, there was no one to come to their aid. But as she looked around at her crew, at the determined faces of the Elysian fighters on the view screen, Reeves knew they couldn't give up. They had come too far, fought too hard, to let it end like this. "Divert all auxiliary power to the engines," she ordered. "We need to get out of here, regroup with the fleet." But even as she spoke, Reeves knew it was too late. A trio of Zorgax fighters, seeing the Frontier's plight, had broken off from the retreating fleet and were bearing down on the crippled ship. Reeves closed her eyes, bracing for the end. But the end didn't come. Instead, a flurry of laser fire erupted around the Frontier as a squadron of Elysian fighters, led by Xyloth himself, came screaming out of the void. "You didn't think we'd leave you, did you?" Xyloth's voice crackled over the comm. "We're in this together, Captain. To the end." As the Elysian fighters drove off the Zorgax, Reeves felt a surge of emotion. In the heat of battle, the lines between human and Elysian had blurred. They were no longer separate species, but a single, united force, fighting for their common survival. But even as the immediate threat passed, Reeves knew their fight was far from over. The Zorgax had been beaten back, but not defeated. They would regroup, rebuild, and return stronger than ever. To truly end this war, the Allies would need to take the fight to the Zorgax, to strike at the heart of their empire. It was a daunting prospect, but as Reeves looked around at her crew, at the unwavering determination in their eyes, she knew they were ready for the challenge. The tide had turned, but the final battle was yet to come. And Reeves and her allies would face it together, united in their resolve, ready to fight and die for the sake of their worlds. Word count, 1137. This part showcases human ingenuity and determination as Reeves and her team develop a new weapon to turn the tide against the Zorgax. It also highlights the growing bond between humans and Elysians as they face the challenges of war together. The part ends with a victory, but also foreshadows the greater challenges ahead. A risky gambit. In the days following the battle, Captain Jenna Reeves drifted in and out of consciousness, her mind a haze of pain and confused memories. The lucky shot from the Zorgax fighter had done more damage than anyone had realized, leaving her with severe internal injuries. As she lay in the med bay of the ESS Frontier, hovering between life and death, the weight of command fell on the shoulders of her second-in-command, Lieutenant Kai Adachi. Kai was a brilliant officer, but he had always been content to follow Reeves' lead. Now, with the fate of the Alliance resting on his decisions, he felt the full burden of leadership. "We can't just sit here," he said, pacing the length of the Frontier's bridge. "The Zorgax are out there, regrouping, preparing for their next assault. We need to strike first." Xyloth, the Elysian liaison, shook his head. "The fleet is in disarray. We need time to regroup, to repair our ships and tend to our wounded." But Kai was not to be dissuaded. "Every moment we waste is a moment the Zorgax use to strengthen their position. We need to take the fight to them, to strike at the heart of their empire." It was a risky plan, one that many in the Allied fleet were hesitant to embrace. To launch an assault on the Zorgax homeworld would require every ship, every soldier they had. If they failed, there would be no second chance. As the debate raged on, Kai found himself wishing for Reeves' guidance. She had always known the right path, had always been able to rally others to her cause. Without her, he felt adrift, unsure of his own judgment. In the end, it was Xyloth who tipped the scales. "Kai is right," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of his decision. "We cannot win this war by playing defense. We must seize the initiative, take the fight to the enemy." With Xyloth's support, the other Elysian leaders fell in line. The die was cast, and the Allied fleet began to prepare for the most daring operation of the war. As the preparations continued, Kai found himself spending more and more time at Reeves' bedside. She was still unconscious, her face pale and drawn, but he found comfort in her presence. "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I wish you were here to guide me." To his surprise, Reeves' eyes fluttered open. She was weak, her voice hoarse, but there was a glimmer of her old strength in her gaze. "You're doing fine, Kai," she said. "Trust your instincts. Trust your team. You'll get us through this." Kai felt a surge of emotion, a mix of relief and gratitude. With Reeves' blessing, he threw himself into the preparations with renewed vigor. Into the fire. As the Allied fleet dropped out of hyperspace on the fringes of the Zorgax home system, they were immediately met with a sight that chilled even the most battle-hardened among them. Arrayed before them was the full might of the Zorgax Empire, a vast armada of warships that stretched as far as the eye could see. At the center of the armada was a massive space station, a fortress of metal and composites that dwarfed even the largest of the Zorgax dreadnoughts. This was the heart of the Empire, the seat of the Zorgax Emperor himself. On the bridge of the ESS Frontier, Lieutenant Kai Adachi felt a moment of doubt. How could they hope to prevail against such overwhelming odds? But he pushed the doubt aside. They had come too far to turn back now. "All ships, engage the enemy," he ordered, his voice steady. "We'll punch a hole through their lines and make straight for the station." As the Allied ships surged forward, the Zorgax fleet moved to meet them. Space lit up with the flash of energy weapons and the silent explosions of ships torn apart by torpedo strikes. In the midst of the chaos, a small strike team led by Kai and Xyloth launched from the frontier, making straight for the Emperor's station. Their mission was simple but daring, to capture the Zorgax leader and force an end to the war. As they dodged and weaved through the battle, Kai couldn't help but think of Captain Reeves, still recovering on the frontier. She had always been the one to lead from the front, to inspire others with her courage and determination. Now, it was his turn. With a final burst of speed, the strike team breached the station's defenses and fought their way to the Emperor's throne room. There, they found themselves face to face with the ruler of the Zorgax, a towering figure clad in elaborate armor. "Surrender," Kai said, his weapon leveled at the Emperor. "Your empire is crumbling. Your fleet is in ruins. It's over." But the Emperor only laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You think you've won, human? You think capturing me will end this war? My people will never submit. They will fight on, until every last one of you is wiped from the galaxy." Kai's finger tightened on the trigger, but Xyloth stayed his hand. "No," the Elysian said. "If we kill him, we're no better than he is. We have to find another way." Back on the frontier, Reeves watched the battle unfold with growing concern. The Zorgax were fighting with a ferocity born of desperation, and the Allied losses were mounting. Suddenly, a massive Zorgax dreadnought broke through the Allied lines, making straight for the frontier. Reeves knew the ship was in no condition to withstand a sustained assault. But she also knew she couldn't abandon her crew, couldn't leave Kai and the others to face the Emperor alone. With a groan of effort, she hauled herself out of the med bay, ignoring the protests of the medics. Every step was agony, but she pushed through the pain, making her way to the bridge. "Captain on deck," someone shouted as she stumbled through the doors. Reeves waved off the concerns, settling heavily into the command chair. "Status report," she demanded. "The dreadnought is closing fast," the tactical officer reported. "Our weapons are having no effect." Reeves nodded, her mind racing. They couldn't outfight the dreadnought. But maybe, just maybe, they could outsmart it. "Bring us about," she ordered. "Plot a course directly for the dreadnought." The bridge crew exchanged shocked looks, but Reeves' voice brooked no argument. The frontier swung around, accelerating towards the oncoming behemoth. "Captain," the navigator said, his voice shaking. "Collision course locked in." Reeves leaned forward, her eyes locked on the view screen. "Hold course. Prepare to engage emergency thrusters on my mark." The dreadnought loomed larger and larger, filling the screen. At the last possible moment, Reeves shouted, "Mark." The Frontier's emergency thrusters fired, wrenching the ship out of the path of the oncoming dreadnought. But the Zorgax ship, its course locked in, couldn't react in time. With a sickening crunch of metal on metal, the dreadnought plowed into the Emperor's station, both structures disintegrating in a blinding flash of light. On the station, Kai and his team were thrown to the ground by the impact. The Emperor, seeing his doom approaching, let out a final, defiant roar. And then, silence. As the dust settled, Kai looked around at his team, at the Elysian and human soldiers who had fought and bled together. "It's over," he said, his voice hoarse. "We did it." But even as they savored their victory, they knew the true cost of the war. The Allied fleet had been decimated, the Elysian homeworld lay in ruins, and countless lives had been lost on both sides. There would be time to mourn, time to rebuild. But for now, in this moment, they allowed themselves to feel the weight of what they had achieved. They had won. Against all odds, they had prevailed. And in doing so, they had forged a bond between their species that would never be broken. A bond of shared sacrifice, of shared triumph. A bond of brotherhood. This part is the climax of the story, where the Allies launch their desperate final assault. It showcases the bravery and determination of both humans and Elysians, as Kai leads the strike on the Emperor's station and Reeves makes a daring move to take out the dreadnought. The part ends with the Emperor's defeat, but also acknowledges the heavy cost of the war. A new dawn. In the aftermath of the battle, a strange quiet settled over the galaxy. The Zorgax Empire, once a looming threat, had been shattered, its emperor dead, its fleet scattered to the winds. On the Elysian homeworld, the process of rebuilding began. The crystal spires that had once reached towards the heavens now lay in ruins, but the spirit of the Elysian people remained unbroken. With the help of their human allies, they set about the task of reconstruction, forging a new society from the ashes of the old. Captain Jenna Reeves and Lieutenant Kai Adachi, the heroes of the war, found themselves at the center of this new era. They were hailed as saviors by both humans and Elysians, their names spoken with reverence and awe. But for Reeves and Kai, the true reward was the bond they had forged, the understanding they had reached. They had started as strangers, as representatives of two different species. Now, they were something more. They were friends, comrades, brothers in arms. As the weeks turned into months, the alliance between humans and Elysians grew stronger. Trade routes were established, cultural exchanges were initiated. For the first time in generations, the galaxy knew true peace. But Reeves and Kai knew that peace was a fragile thing. There would always be new threats, new challenges to face. And so, even as they celebrated their victory, they prepared for the future. They trained new recruits, forged new alliances, always ready for the next fight. For they knew that the galaxy was a vast and dangerous place, filled with wonders and terrors beyond imagining. But they also knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Humans and Elysians, side by side, ready to defend the peace they had fought so hard to achieve. As Reeves stood on the bridge of the newly repaired ESS Frontier, looking out at the stars, she felt a sense of hope, of possibility. The war had taken a heavy toll, but it had also shown what they were capable of when they worked together. And now, with the whole galaxy open before them, there was no telling what they might achieve. Kai joined her, his presence a comforting reminder of all they had been through. "What's next, Captain?" he asked, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Reeves returned the smile, her eyes still fixed on the infinite expanse of space. "Everything," she said. "Everything." Word count, 662. This final part serves as an epilogue, showing the aftermath of the war and the new era of peace and cooperation between humans and Elysians. It highlights the personal growth of Reeves and Kai, and their enduring friendship, while also hinting at the challenges and adventures that lie ahead. The story concludes on a hopeful note, with the sense that despite the difficulties they've faced, humans and Elysians are ready to face the future together.